So next up, we have a presentation from Argenica Therapeutics with the ticker code AGN. To tell us more about their novel neuroprotective therapeutics to reduce brain damage after stroke, I will now hand you over to CEO, Dr. Liz Dallimore. Good morning, Liz.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity and for having me today.
It's great to have you back on. Let me just pull up your presentation.
Thank you. Great. I'm Liz Dallimore. I'm the Managing Director and CEO of Argenica Therapeutics, and delighted to present to you today our business and why we think it could be revolutionary in neuroprotection. So just a disclaimer of our forward-looking statements. So this is just a quick sort of snapshot of who we are and what we are trying to do. So as a company, we are looking to develop best-in-class novel neuroprotective therapeutics. So that's essentially therapeutics that can protect brain cells following damage, so say after stroke or other types of brain injury. Our lead drug candidate is ARG-007, and it's shown extensive neuroprotective effects in animal models of stroke. We are delighted always to partner with leading research institutes in Western Australia, the Paraneuroscience Research Institute and the University of Western Australia. And we will be partnering with Linear to progress our drug into clinical trials shortly. Our drug has patents that are granted in EU, Japan, China, and the US, and those patents are owned 100% by Argenica and free of all encumbrances. So just a quick snapshot of our capital structure. We have around just over $4 million in the bank, and that's enough to see us through to the end of our phase 1 clinical trial. As of yesterday, we're sitting around a market cap of 31 million. We still have big shareholdings from our founding research institutes in Parent and UWA. So I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of why we're going after a neuroprotective therapeutic in stroke initially. Stroke is a huge global issue, and there are currently no drugs available on the market that are able to protect brain cells following a stroke. Stroke is extremely prevalent, so around 15 million strokes every year, and that equates to one person every 19 minutes in Australia suffering a stroke. And the long-term outcomes for these patients are quite dire. So there's often lasting brain damage, there's a high death rate and long-term disability. And we have a saying in the stroke community that time is brain. So once you get that initial sort of area of cell death, you get this cascade out of cell death, which results in around 1.9 million neurons dying every minute. And this is what Argenica is trying to address. We're trying to stop that increasing cell death in its tracks and buy these patients time to get to the hospital to receive treatment. So just to give you just an overview, if you're not familiar, what currently happens with stroke treatment. So when a paramedic arrives to someone that's suspected of having a stroke, there's very little that they can do in terms of in-field triage. So the aim is to get that patient to hospital as soon as possible. But as I said before, you're getting this increasing amounts of neuronal cell death in the brain. So the longer it takes to get to hospital, you're getting these rapidly increasing levels of cell death. Now, it's really important to diagnose the type of stroke that a patient has had. 85% of all strokes are made up of what's termed ischemic stroke, and this is caused by a clot in a blood vessel in the brain. The other 15% is what's termed as a hemorrhagic stroke, which is a slow bleed on the brain. However, the treatment options for the two types of stroke are quite different, and the drug that's given to ischemic stroke patients to dissolve the clot can actually be detrimental to patients that have suffered a hemorrhagic stroke. So all the while patients are in the hospital getting CT scans, working out what type of stroke they've had, you're seeing these increasing amounts of cell death. So what Argenica is essentially trying to do is we're trying to develop a neuroprotective therapeutic that can be delivered by paramedics in the field. So increasing the amount, to reduce the amount of neuronal cell damage that we're seeing. If we can give this in the field, we're going to be able to protect brain cells and buy these patients more time to get the treatments that they need. So how does our drug work? So whilst nothing can protect brain cells from that initial infarct, what we're trying to do is to stop that cascade of cell death that we see from the clot in the brain. So what we've shown in animal models of stroke is that our peptide is able to have multiple mechanisms of action so that we can preserve neuronal tissue and protect that still viable tissue. And what we've shown in 9 peer-reviewed publications of animal models of stroke and 5 in vitro publications is that we're getting really significant efficacy of our drug. We've also got published publications in traumatic brain injury and hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. So we've got really encouraging results to date. We've shown that we're reducing neuronal cell death by up to 67% in an animal model of stroke, and that this is lasting out to 28 days post-stroke. We've also shown that our drug does not exacerbate bleeding in patients with hemorrhagic stroke, which is really important. So it means that we can deliver it in the field, regardless of the type of stroke a patient has had. And we're now starting to collect our safety and toxicology data to allow us to go into a phase 1 clinical trial. We've also shown that our drug can be co-administered with the clot dissolving drug, which is known as TPA, that is given to ischemic stroke patients. So it can be co-administered without any adverse effects. So we've got some really exciting near-term catalysts as we go into our phase 1 clinical trial. We've just completed our GLP safety and toxicology studies where we're showing no adverse effects of our drug in terms of toxicity and also safety as well at our efficacious doses. We're now just finalising our pharmacokinetic studies as well as we move into the clinical trials. So these studies are essential to get ethics approval to be able to do our first in-human phase 1 clinical trial. We're now also ramping up for that phase 1 clinical trial, and we aim to have ethics approval by the end of Q2, ethics submission by the end of Q2 this calendar year to allow us to start our phase 1 clinical trial. So what are we aiming to do in our phase 1 clinical trial? So this is a trial in healthy human volunteers, and it's really allowing us to assess the safety of our drug, the tolerability in healthy volunteers, and what that ideal safe dose is to go into a phase 2 clinical trial. So the trial design is relatively straightforward. We have 4 cohorts coming in and 8 patients in each cohort. This is what's termed an escalating dose clinical trial. So the first cohort will receive the lowest dose. We'll make sure there's no adverse effects on those volunteers, and we'll collect data over 8 days. Once we've sort of shown that the drug is safe in those first cohort, we'll move to the next cohort and so on. So we anticipate that the entire trial will be wrapped up by the end of this calendar year. So in collecting that data in healthy volunteers, it allows us to go into phase 2 studies. So we'll move directly into phase 2 study in stroke patients, where we'll likely deliver our drug in the emergency department of stroke patients coming in. And again, looking primarily at the safety of our drug in stroke patients with some exploratory data in terms of the efficacy that we're seeing in these stroke patients. It also then allows us to move into other indications directly into phase 2. So those areas that we're looking at in HIE, TBI and surgically induced stroke. So we're supported by an experienced team. So myself and also Dr. Sam South, who's got extensive experience in drug development, and a fantastic board with experience not only in drug development, but also in capital markets. So just to wrap up what we see as the key investment highlights in Argenica, we've got a really clear pathway to clinical trials. So going into our phase 1 clinical trial shortly. We're addressing a huge unmet need, not only in stroke patients, but also in infants suffering hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, which is a detrimental disease, and we're getting some really good preclinical data in that. We pride ourselves on the preclinical data and the rigor of science that we've put before this company, and we continue to do that as we move into the clinic and explore other indications. As I said, we've already got 24 peer-reviewed publications on our drug. We're supported by an exceptional team, and we've got some really exciting near-term catalysts as we move into the clinic and really try to change the lives of these people suffering a horrendous brain injury. So thanks for listening, and welcome any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Liz. And one of the webinar attendees is actually congratulate you on the excellent job you've done so far, and I do mirror them. And they've also asked, so is the company still on track to start phase 1 during the current quarter? And if so, if phase 1 is successful, when do you envisage phase 2 commencing?
Yeah, sure. So we're working really hard to get our ethics submission in this quarter. The ethics will go to a company called Bellbury. So I think there's been a little bit of confusion as to how that will actually work. So we're not going to hospital ethics, but we're going to Bellbury. They have a turnaround time of, on average, around 20 days. So we're envisaging as soon as the ethics submission goes in, it won't be long till we can crack on with the clinical trial. We aim to finish the clinical trial by the end of this calendar year. And we're already starting to prepare for our phase 2. So we're hoping that we can get ethics submission in for our phase 2 in Q1 next calendar year.
Thank you. And I think there's been mentioned before that there are opportunities to expand the applications for ARG007. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, sure. So what the focus at the moment is we're really interested in hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. And this is a reduction in blood flow to the brain in infants. So it usually occurs either immediately prior, during, or post-labour. And it's one of the leading causes of mortality and disability in children. So it's a severe disease, and again, no drugs are available to protect brain cells in these babies. We've got some really exciting data, so we're continuing to progress that quite extensively, and having the phase 1 trial completed, it will allow us to go straight into a phase 2 for that indication. We've also got really good data in traumatic brain injury, but also cardiac arrest as well. So a few areas that we're looking at exploring. So yeah, it's exciting.
Wonderful. Well, again, congratulations. It's been great to see your journey. And I also note that Euro's Hartley's actually have issued a spec by recommendation with their latest research note with the price target of $1. So look forward to getting you back on for that.
Yes, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And of course, a copy of today's presentation will be available online on brokerbriefing.com in the coming days.